So who doesn't like? So who doesn't like woodworking tips and tricks? But what is the chance that you're actually gonna remember them? Well, I guarantee you're gonna remember these 5 because I use them all the time. Like all the time. First one on the list is a story stick. Now, what is a story stick? Now, oftentimes, if you have a project, you're gonna be using a tape measure. If you're making small measurements, maybe you might be using something like this, a square. Well, a story stick is just basically a way of taking your measurements once, marking them on the stick, and then you never have to repeat the same measurement. So your margin for error is going to be reduced dramatically because you do it once and you use this as your one and only template. So let me show you how it works. Okay, so let's say you're building some cabinets or a table or whatever other piece of furniture that you might be doing. And you have cuts on there that I'm just going to be picking random numbers because I'm not actually building anything at the moment. But let's say you have a measurement that needs to be 13 and an eighth. So we make a mark at 13 and an eighth. And then let's say you have another measurement that needs to be at 31 and 5/8. So we'll make another mark over here. And you keep doing this for every measurement that you have. Now, you could stop here and end with these pencil lines, continuing them along with your square, or you could use a knife, which I prefer because that's going to give you the most accurate measurement. So I come to my measurement and I score along that line, making it nice and deep. Then what I'll also do is I'm going to continue this knife line along this side and this side. And now I have a perfectly square line that continues along 3 sides. That way, if I have to transfer my mark, it's going to be there no matter what side I'm using. Now what you can also do is attach a hard stop on the end of your story stick. So that way, let's say we were making a mark on here, I don't have to worry that the butt ends of my 2 pieces of wood are going to be lined up perfectly. I'm going to put a hard stop on here, and that's going to act as a reference point so that I don't have to clamp it or feel around to see if I got it just right. So to do that, I typically just take a little bit of CA glue and brad nail it to the end. Now typically I use a little bit wider of a piece of wood, like a piece of plywood, but for the purpose of this, I'm just using this thin piece, which is going to work honestly just as well. So let's say this piece of plywood is one of the pieces on my project, and I need to transfer over this mark that is the 13 and an eighth. So what I can do is line this up. I have this stop that gives me a perfect reference, and then using a knife or a pencil if you prefer. So check this out. I can literally put my knife into this line I made and make a perfect mark on this piece of wood. So that's going to be dead accurate. So now I put my knife back into the mark I just made and score across the top. So now my layout lines have pretty much no margin of error. So one last tip to using this technique is to label all your measurements. So we know that this is going to be 13 and an eighth, and then however many measurements you have, you just make sure that you label them, and then that way you take your measurements once and all you're doing after that is transferring them with little to no error at all. Oh. So who's ever tried drilling a hole with a big auger bit and got a hole that looks something like this? So getting holes with tear out like this can be one of the most frustrating parts in a project, especially if you're nearing the end and you kind of mindlessly just, grab the drill and just go to drill a hole, not really thinking about it. I'm going to show you how to avoid this in plywood and really any wood for that matter. So in this case, I'm using an auger bit. So you can see this bit is basically pulled in by this screw mechanism, which is nice if you're having to drill really deep holes. But for my purposes here, and a lot of times, I want to actually disengage this tip right here and basically just let the cutting be done by this blade. So let me show you how to do that. So let's say we want to drill a hole right next to this piece. I'm just going to make a mark with the auger to line up the bit. So now what you can do is take a bit that's slightly bigger or in similar size to that screw mechanism at the front of the auger bit. So this is essentially going to reduce how much pulling power this auger bit has into this material, and it's going to slow down our cut rate and make it a lot more controllable. So I'll take this bit drill all the way through. Then I'll go ahead and switch out back to my auger bit. So in reverse, I'm going to be doing the same thing. And you can see already how much cleaner that hole is. Now, what I want to do is typically at least get through that first layer of plywood, and then I can switch the bit into the regular rotation. Now you might get a little bit of burning there if you're going too fast. And then here I can switch to my regular rotation, and you can notice that that front tip of the bit isn't biting anymore. So it's not going to be pulling my drill as hard as it was when I first did it. So here we can go nice and slow. And then also you can back it up if you notice that it's biting too much. So depending on how clean of a hole you want it, make sure you go slow, then use the reverse, back it up if you notice that it's biting too much into the material. Now if you want a hole to be clean on both sides, let's say this, oh, we already have a bad exit hole over here, but I would have done it a little bit different. If I wanted that exit to be cleaner, I would have clamped a piece of wood to the back of this. But let's say you did want this exit to be clean, we would just repeat this process on this side of the hole. Finishes. Who likes finishing? I kind of hate finishing, to be quite honest, but there's one finish that I found that if I actually want a piece that needs to be done that day and it meets some criteria, like it's not going to be used as a cutting board, or it's not a piece of furniture that's going to get a ton of traffic from cups, that might contain alcohol, then there is a finish I go to because I can actually finish my piece within that hour or two. Polyurethane, Rubio Monocoat, teak oil. So these are all finishes that most of us are familiar with. They are oil-based finishes. Teak oil is actually a combination of boiled linseed oil and tung oil. It's a mix of both. Polyurethane is a synthetic finish, and then Rubio Monocoat is also actually boiled linseed oil with a wax, and then there's a hardener that's added to it to give it more of a hard finish. And now there's a finish that used to be the mainstay of furniture finishes and it was one of the old-time classics. But for whatever reason, and probably some of the reason has to do with the fact that it doesn't have the same kind of durability if you were to be using it in places that have foot traffic or on pieces of furniture such as coffee tables or dining tables. But by all accounts, this is a great finish that I absolutely love once I found out about it and how to actually use it. So that finish is shellac. When I first heard shellac, I thought it was this generic term for just kind of like shellac it. But shellac it's a really cool finish, but it's also pretty weird. It's actually secretions from bugs that form these flakes. And basically shellac is alcohol based. So denatured alcohol dissolves these flakes and then forms this finish. As a result, this does not have a very strong smell, such as a polyurethane or even teak oil, any of the boiled linseed oil finishes that give off a much stronger smell. So in California, we're actually not allowed to buy denatured alcohol. Don't ask me why. For whatever reason, we can't buy denatured alcohol. So I typically buy this bullseye shellac that's already pre-mixed. It comes in an amber finish and also a clear. So the amber obviously just gives off more of a yellow hue. And then if you want just something that's gonna be a clear coat, then you would use the clear. So what makes shellac so great is the fact that you can literally finish a project in a day and not have to wait till the next day to come back, do another coat. You can do multiple coats in a day and have a finished product that looks great. So let me show you how I typically do it. So typically I'll take a t-shirt. I don't normally use colored cloth, but in this case, this is all I had laying around. I'll take a t-shirt or something else that doesn't have a lot of fuzzies, and I'll wrap up another small piece of rag inside it. Then I'll tie this off with a string. Now I'll make sure my shellac is mixed up well. And for this base coat, it's important to just do real light passes. So this finish, if it's your first time using it, it has a bit different consistency. It's a lot thinner than a polyurethane finish or definitely a Rubio monocoat. So I'll just wet this rag, not too much, and just do light passes. Going down the grain. And another benefit of using shellac is I actually really like the smell of it. It's one of those smells that, I don't know, it just smells like a classic wood shop. So at this point, this will actually dry really quickly, but we can wait 10 to 15 minutes and then we'll come back and I'll show you how to finish it. Only been about 5-10 minutes and this is actually already ready for a second coat. And I felt it with my, you can feel it with your bare fingers, and if it's not sticky, if you went real light with that first coat, you can do that second coat already. So that's the great thing about shellac, is just the drying time is so much faster than any of the other finishes. And some people, as you can see on this can, use a brush. I first attempted it with a brush and I did not have good results. The danger with shellac is if you go on too thick, you're gonna get buildup of the finish in different spots and it'll look blotchy. So you wanna go on real thin and make sure to just go slow and go on thin. So I'll get this wet again and just do another second coat. And what you notice with shellac, and one of the cool things about it, is it literally sticks to everything. Like this stuff will stick to unprimed surfaces. It sticks to everything and anything. So this is where finishing with shellac is unlike finishing with anything else. And the first time I tried this, I was kind of blown away that it actually worked, because it seems just kind of crazy. But basically here I have this 3-in-1 machine oil. And what I'm gonna be doing is I'm gonna be mixing this, using this as a lubricant to get a really high sheen finish with my shellac. And yeah, to me, this is kind of like magic. It's crazy that shellac sticks even to oiled wood. So basically what I typically do is do a few drops over here. And I'll come back and get this wet. And then basically I just start working this shellac in oil around the whole workpiece. And you can tell as you're doing this that this basically counteracts that natural stickiness that shellac gets. And this is what's known as French polish. And basically between coats, you can wait again for 15 minutes. Really what you can do is just feel your workpiece. And if it feels too tacky, then you can just wait a little bit and you just do coats like that. So this one feels pretty tacky, so I'll give it 10-15 minutes to dry, and then we'll do another coat. And before you know it, we'll have a high gloss finish that's actually going to be ready to go today. And basically you can repeat this process as many times as you want, taking this up to just kind of this super high gloss mirror finish, or you could leave it at this stage. It's kind of up to you with the type of finish you're going for, but for me, I like to use shellac when I really want that kind of real high gloss mirror finish. And I'll repeat this process maybe 5-6 times. And I don't know, for me, this is just like magic. It's so cool. So this is the piece after about 6 coats, and you could keep going with this and get even a finer finish. Basically fill in the grain. I can see here I haven't quite filled in the grain everywhere, but I think this is awesome. I actually started waiting less between coats and just using a blow dryer to speed up the process. So I don't know, to me this is one of those finishes that's like the best kept secret of the old time woodworkers. So shellac, if you've got a surface that you want done in one day, give this a try. Okay, this next tip again is about being accurate, only this time with the table saw. So let's say you're building something and you need to cut it to 5 inches. What do? You set your table saw fence to 5 inches and then you cut. And then before you know it, you notice that some of the boards may not be perfectly straight, or you might be getting a little bit of burning or whatever it is. So what I normally do if I'm cutting a board is go a little bit above. And in this case, it would be, 5 1/8 to 5 1/4 inches. Then I do the final pass so that I'm not hogging off a ton of material that has the potential to, pinch the blade and get a burn mark or get one of those gouges where basically the saw leaves a little bit of an indent and then you have to plane it out and then you change the thickness of that board. So start off a little bit larger than your final width, and then for your final cut, take off just that last little bit of material, and that ensures you get a clean, accurate cut and your boards are perfect. So I recently was doing a project where I needed a custom size walnut dowel and they didn't have any at the store. I couldn't find any online and I needed it like yesterday. So simple solution to this is if you have a piece of scrap metal, this is about 4 millimeters thick, you just drill the size hole that you want your dowel to be, and you can clean up the edges. Next, you can just put it in your vise or somewhere where it's not going to move, but it has to have space under it for obvious reasons, because we're basically going to be forcing this thing through this hole. And then I carved the tip of mine so that it fits into my drill. You can also use a drill press for this if you have one, but if you only have a hand drill, that will do as well. So we can carve this other tip to help get it started in this hole. And it's that easy, custom sized dowel. So obviously if you want a nicer finish, you can throw it back in the drill and run some sandpaper across it. But typically for dowels, all you need is for it to plug up a hole, and then you're gonna be chopping it off anyway. So hope you like those tips. If you like content like this, hit the like button and subscribe. Catch you on the next one.